Welcome, friends, to this episode of the Sync Your Life podcast. Today, I'm joined by my new friend, Chris Felton. I can't wait to dive into this conversation today. You guys know that I like to offer a mix of health and wellness advice, but I also like to bring in people to talk about things really related to personal growth, how we can be better people, right? It's all about not just our bodies, but our minds as well, how we interact in the world, our relationships, and everything else. So that's what we're all about today. We're going to take a little break from our usual hormone health conversation, and we're going to talk more just about transforming our lives, right? What does it look like to really embrace the right type of mindset? What does it look like to change your mindset? What does it look like to really believe that you're worthy, right? This is an idea that I'm excited to dive into. So, Chris, without further ado, welcome to the show. I'll have you just kick things off by sharing more about who you are and what you do and what led you to doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, Jenny, thanks for having me. This is awesome. Looking forward to it. And I'm in Colorado, 51. I've been a financial services entrepreneur for the last 24 years. And before that, I call myself a recovered CPA. So, first step's denial, and then we move through the 12 steps. But graduated Colorado State University in 93, and I moved to Denver. And I went to work for a large Big Six public accounting firm and did, 70, 80, 90 hours a week for 7 years, and then looked to the guy that was ahead of me 10 years, and he was on his fourth marriage, and he was in horrible shape, and his kids hated him. And I'm like, that's where I'm going. And so I launched my entrepreneurial platform, and then in 1999, I went full-time in February 2000. And right when I did that, married. My now 21-year-old was on the way, and that marriage did not last very long. And we separated in 2004 when my youngest was just a few months old, and they moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and then met my second and last wife, Marlo. And I went through a very expensive divorce. I pretty much just laid down in the divorce because I had so much guilt around it. And then, I had some success. I had some trophies, and I looked successful, and I talked a good game. But what my wife didn't realize, my second wife, was that I had accumulated $250,000 of credit card debt. I signed a stupid office lease that I couldn't afford, and just had some serious money issues. And I gave up control of the household finances to her, the best financial decision I ever made. But the pain ensued from that. And kind of my turning point in my life, Jenny, was 2008. I'm a financial services entrepreneur. We're in the middle of the Great Recession, and I am having to pay my ex-wife $5,200 a month in alimony and child support on the first of every month. And I'm out of money. I'm just out of money. I can't borrow anymore. Marlo and I hadn't merged our finances yet. And so the only way I can pay her is come home and butter my wife up and ask her for the money. I don't know if anyone's ever done this before, Jenny, but I asked my wife for the money to pay my ex-wife. And that didn't go very good. My wife's 5'1". Volcanic Marlo is a very scary scenario. And we had the fight of all fights. And Jenny, she got so pissed, she threw her purse. And the 20 years,
women's purses can be big, so I won't ask how big the purse was, but
well, the 20 years of collection in there, I saw some stuff, from the 80s come out, and it's like, and then she picked it up and threw it again, and picked it up and threw it again. And it was cussing me out, and we kind of had the fight of all fights. And I just said, well, if I'm such a, why are we still together? Why are you still here? Why are we still married? And total silence. And she went upstairs to ponder the question, should I stay or should I go? And that was kind of my awakening. I could literally, Jenny, just see, I saw dominoes fall. Mm-hmm. That's what I imaged. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, your ex-wife really never had a chance. Your kids are little. You're a horrible dad. You're about ready to blow this. Your finances suck. You're drinking too much. You're not in good, like it was just da 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 da. And the financial stress was like causing my wife physical pain.
Mhm.
And that's when I realized, I'm like, huh, what's the common theme here? Oh, me.
Yeah.
I was the common denominator to the mess. And that's really when I took 100% responsibility. And I just realized, dude, you got to humble down. You need to freaking change.
Mhm.
And so thank God, my wife's weakest moment, she focused on what she loved about me. And I started shifting that because I was focusing on what was wrong about her. And we came together the next day and she said, we're not getting divorced. We're not declaring bankruptcy. We're not getting jobs. We're going to figure this out. And she got on planes, trains, and automobiles for the next 2 years. We had access to wealthy mentors, thank God, that really had wealth in all areas of their life. And so she went and interviewed them and figured out what they did, what they thought. And then her thing was, what are you going to do? And I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm changing. And I'm not interested in changing. I'm committed to changing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be up early and I'm going to figure out how my mind keeps creating broke. I think I have a pretty good idea because dad's broke, mom's broke, grandma's broke, grandpa's broke. I think I have some inherited belief systems that I've never really questioned before in my life. And I'm going to break it down and figure it out. And that's what I did, sister. I mean, image, visualize, journal. If you would have told me to stand on my head for an hour to change my life, I would have. I was all in like an Olympic athlete is with their sport. And
Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes of Mel Robbins is, it doesn't happen overnight, but it happens over time. And what happened to us was, a jaw-dropping transformation, not just financially, for me personally, spiritually, my energy. I mean, like everything. And I'm
Mhm.
51 and I got more energy now than I did at 41 because I just released years of garbage and guilt and all that crap. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I love that. And I mean, the first step is always awareness, whether that comes to this like money mindset or it comes to health, right? I mean, I used to say when my husband and I owned a gym for several years, we used to, welcome new members all the time. And usually January, February was a big time of year, right? People would come in the door of the gym, they're wanting to make a change. But I always used to say, these are the people that are interested in making a change. Just like you said, you use the phrase interest versus commitment. My favorite were when people came in October because I knew when they were coming in October that they'd had enough. They weren't waiting for the new year. They were making a commitment, right? And so that was my favorite time of year to train people because I was working with the people who were there. They were going to show up. They were fully committed. And so I want to start there in this conversation. I want to talk about mindset and awareness, how that really is the first step, and how people can go about transforming from the state of awareness. Okay, you realized, right, that you were the common denominator. How do you go from, okay, recognizing that, okay, I'm the issue, now what? What's the next step?
yeah, I mean, at least for me, it was excuse me. It was I mean, kind of the crux of the mindset stuff was, we shower every day, we brush our teeth every day, we eat every day, right? Hopefully we work out a lot, right? We go to the gym. Um, I had to go to the mental gym every single day. And what happens is beginning of the year, people are trying to change 25 things and, they're motivated, they're interested, they're not committed, and they don't understand really the power of small steps compounded over time, right? So the masses, they wait for big things to happen to them before they make a change. Once this happens, then, right, they have a very much an outside in approach to life. And I lived that way for decades. But I knew I had to change the inside out because one of my favorite quotes is, your world is a mirror and is giving you feedback for what you're putting out. And so the feedback I was getting was stress and fear and worry and doubt and broke. Well, that's what was going on internally. So I had to make a daily commitment of going to the mental gym. And whether that's 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, it was, all the stuff I talked about. It was journaling, it was prayer time, it was, reading, whatever. And And 30 minutes a day over a year, Jenny, it's 4.5 working weeks of personal growth. And over a decade, it's huge. So I had to commit to that habit, and then I had to put it aside, and then I had to execute my plan whether I was ready or not. Because a lot of people, I call them personal development zombies. They listen to podcasts, they're taking in all this information, but there's no application to it, and they're waiting to get fixed, and then they're going to take action. And so what worked for me was, okay, I'm going to work on a belief for the next 70 days. I'm going to work on an affirmation for the next 70 days. I'm going to do this stuff. I'm going to get clear. I know I'm throwing a bunch of stuff at you, but the gist is, the crux was, I got to win today. And I have to begin to keep my word. And I do a post every January 1st. I'm like, you're probably setting a ton of goals. Just make keeping your word your number one goal. Not that we're perfect, not that I'm perfect, but I had to keep my word to myself, because the problem, Jenny, was my confidence was shattered. Because here I am, a man with some skills, and I'm not delivering for my spouse. I'm not delivering for my kids. And so the only way I was going to get my confidence back was, I'm like, alarms going off at 4:30 in the morning, get your ass up and start working on you, and then execute your plan. And that compounding of working on me every single day over the last however many years is really what transformed my world.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like, hearing you talk and share this, it makes me think of, there are certain things that had to be let go, and then certain new things that had to be embraced, right? Like, so I'm also thinking of this quote that I heard, and I'll probably butcher it, but it has to do with the fact that, like, if we want to change, we have to change the way we act. But in order to change the way we act, we have to change the way we think. Right. And it's the same thing is true. I mean, even as a social media influencer, somebody who's teaching nutrition and wellness, oftentimes it's not about me teaching the thing. It's about me teaching the mindset around the thing. Right. Like, that's the most important part. One thing that you had said when we had a pre-chat before this official recording was, you talked about the role of forgiveness, like forgiveness of yourself, forgiveness of maybe even other people. I'd love for you to touch on that topic as well.
Yeah, that's a big one. So I, so in that moment of, looking at my results, right, and not liking my results, and I'm like, my way's not working too well. So and I think I said it before, I had to humble down, and I had to kick pride to the door. And I met a coach I worked with for 4 years. I interviewed dozens of them, but the main requirement was he had to be financially independent, because that's what I had to work on. I had to work on my money stuff. And he was amazing. And we did our first session, and he said, Chris, you're a great goal setter. You're a horrible goal achiever. And there's some how-tos in my book where I talk about, how to implement and actually set a goal and hit them, all those good things. So we do our first coaching session, and he said, Chris, I got a homework assignment for you. And as I said, I'm a recovered CPA, right? And I'm like, oh, goody, homework. Yay, homework. I love homework. Because, Jenny, I thought I needed the strategy. I thought I needed the how-tos. I thought I needed, the left brain stuff. And he threw a curveball. He said, your homework assignment is you must forgive your ex-wife. And I couldn't believe it. I said, Coach, whose side are you on? Like, she's a horrible person. Like, why? And he interrupted me. He said, if you don't forgive her, you will be a broke joke your entire life. You'll never let your money in. And thank God in that moment, I was coachable enough that I didn't really question that or had him explain it to me any further. But I was broke, and I was resenting her big time. And he said, I'm saying, all right, Coach, what do I do? He's like, when we're done, grab a pad of paper, write her name at the top of the page, And I want you to write down everything you appreciate about her. And I said, okay. And he said, and do it the next day, and do it the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day. And you'll know when you no longer need to do it. And so Jenny, I wrote her name at the top, and I've never stared at a blank piece of paper for an hour. And I was like, the resentment is legit. I'm like, he's so right. Because what I talk a lot about is it's not time management, it's energy management. And one of the reasons I have better energy at 51 than 41 is I don't have these energy leaks. And when I do, I plug the hole pretty quick. And so I wrote down, okay, she's a great mom. She's a world-class mom. And then, the next day I did it again. I'm like, God, maybe she's my greatest teacher, right? Maybe there's something here. There's a reason I'm going through it. So then I started accumulating this pretty big list, and I no longer needed to write it down. I would be on a run or in my car, and I would just every day just kind of mentally run through the list. And hey, you know how the brain works. The new neural pathways were wiring and firing. And the old ones that had resentment and reliving fights and all the things she did to me, those started going away. I actually can't even mentally go back there. And then it was, hey, Merry Christmas text. Hey, Happy Mother's Day. Thanks, for everything you do for our kids and all that. Her and I standing next to each other at baseball games. My kids are in Atlanta. I'm in Colorado. I'd fly in. We're catching up on each other's lives. So we never had like the real, like, I forgive you conversation, but the mental was transformative.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of stuff I talk about in my book, just like the blessings, like the last chapter I can't talk about because I lose it every single time. One of the greatest miracles of my life between her and I would have never have happened. And I'll just kind of end with this a little bit, Jenny. And I made a commitment that every time I ended a keynote talk or a workshop, that topic was how I was going to end.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's magical. And I'll deliver a talk and I'll come off stage and, there'll be some people waiting to talk to me. And I feel like, oh, I covered so much cool stuff. And that is all they want to talk about is forgiveness. And it's all the same thing, Jenny, every single time. They'll say, wait. You're telling me I'm stuck because I need to forgive ...
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
how's your way working? And then my favorite story, then I'll get off this. I get fired up about this. I get fired up about this topic. So I delivered like a day-long workshop for a group of advisors in Texas. And I finished the morning session and I covered all sorts of stuff. And, I'm being a legend in my own mind. I'm like, I crushed that and it's awesome. And this 5'1", short guy comes up to me and he's in his early 60s and he's like, that was good. But he's like, that last part, you're telling me that the reason I'm where I am is because I haven't forgiven my ex-wife. I'm like, how long has it been, dude? 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, wait here. And he went into the parking lot and he called her.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the conversation. And he came in, and snot all over his shirt. I mean, his eyes were puffy. And Jenny, he looked 10 years younger.
Yeah.
He gave me a huge hug. He kissed me on my right cheek. He walked out the door and never saw him again.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I love this. I love this as the direction that you're taking your life. And I do want to make sure we point people to your book called Think and Grow You. Love the title too, by the way, because when you hear Think and Grow, you think of Think and Grow Rich. But that's the whole point of what I'm about to say, which is, it makes total sense that I'm assuming the majority of people don't need the strategy. They don't need the left brain stuff. They need this. They need the growth component, right? Like understanding what their mindset is. One thing that I've referenced a lot is Carol Dweck has a book called Mindset, where she talks about sort of a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. This is something that I talk about with my health coaches. I lead a team of health coaches, and I find that a lot of them are holding themselves back from, I'll say, financial success because of this scarcity mindset, right? Because maybe it's almost like it was deeply rooted in them and this isn't just for my health coaches, like this is for other people that I see in day-to-day life too, like this idea that like they grew up around not enough money. There was never enough money. There was never enough XYZ, right? And I see this in parenting too, where like parents who didn't get what they wanted as children turn around and they give they give their children whatever they want, right? It's like this continual cycle. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, how much of this is rooted in how we've grown up, especially as it pertains to money. What should people be really thinking about as it pertains to like maybe the ways that they think about money?
Yeah, I mean, just how beliefs are formed is, when we're little kids, we have no ability to accept or reject ideas. We like right now we have a conscious mind or subconscious mind, and if I say something outlandish, you guys can say, well, that's not right, and you can reject the idea. And so that gatekeeper, it doesn't exist when you're kids until it gets fully formed. And so from 0 to 4, Jenny, you're 50% programmed, meaning you're programmed on autopilot from 0 to 4, 50%. It's crazy. So you're programmed on money. You're programmed on people are good or bad, world's good or bad. By the time you're 10, you're about 70-75% programmed. By the time you're 18, you are 95% hardwired programmed. And there's an amazing book out there I haven't thought about in a while. It's called Tapping into Wealth by Margaret Lynch. And she uses emotional freedom technique around releasing money beliefs. It's unbelievable. And I'm trying to think if I referenced it in my book. It's so good. And she says the biggest determining factor of your financial success is the vows that you made to gain acceptance into your family at a young age. So the biggest determining factor of your financial success is the vows that you made to gain acceptance into your family at a young age. Which means to gain their acceptance, you kind of buy their BS. So when my dad was like, rich people are crooks. They make money on the backs of poor people. Yeah, so we get that, and we get scarcity because we live in the richest country on the planet, and more than 90% of people retire broke. Why? If you Google the word money, there's plenty of stuff. There's plenty of information. I mean, I do financial advising, and there's not a lack of information, but it's all around. The analogy I give is everyone's looking for the golf club. I mean, I'm a 17 handicap. I've been that way forever. I'm looking for the golf club that's going to fix everything, but I really need to go to work on my golf swing. And my golf swing is my mentality around money. And so I was an advisor and a CPA and broke. I had a bag full of golf clubs, but my golf swing was horrific. So what I had to do is, so we get 95% program by the time we're 18. And then what happens, Jenny, is it goes unchecked. And it's the same with health. I mean, you deal with it all the time. If they're told, hey, you're fat when you're young and you're this and you're that, then that programming, or I'm unhealthy or whatever it is, I'm a smoker, I'm this, I'm that, we get programmed. And so around money, what happens, and one of my good friends, Steve Siebold, he's got the longest running study of self-made millionaires and billionaires. And what he realized is almost all the people he studied, they had the same garbage handed to them when they were kids, the limiting beliefs. And then what happens is we grow up, and then our society villainizes wealth. Spider-Man, okay, the Green Goblin, bad guy, is a billionaire. The movie The Titanic portrays wealthy people horrible. So, the wealthy people are upstairs having dinner, they hate each other. And then down below is all the broke people drinking, dancing on tables, having the time of our lives. So it's hard to get wealthy in the United States because of the messaging and the programming. And anyway, But at some point, per Steve's study, and I was interviewed in that, and it happened to me. And for me, it was when I was 37. I had to go, time out. This isn't working. I don't like my results. So what I did, and it's a topic in my book, you don't have a money problem, you have a money project. I had to take the project on, because the way we view problems is, oh no, I got a problem. What? Woe is me. We take a victim mentality to it. We're helpless. We can't fix it. But projects, we view projects differently. Projects, when we face an obstacle, doesn't matter. We're going to plow through it. I mean, you've seen this in your health consulting, right? We will see a project all the way through to the end. Problems can remain in our lives for years. Well, I had money problems for decades. And then my coach said, you got a money project. And you've been thinking this way for a long time. You're not going to spin out of this in 21 days, Chris. But if you start working on this every single day, it will shift. And so the first assignment he had me do, Jenny, was just get a journal. It was my money journal. It was green. And I wrote the word money at the very top. And I wrote down everything I made up about that word. And it was all these limiting beliefs. Can't make it, can't save it, can't keep it, can't this, hard was everywhere, hard to make, hard to keep, difficult, challenging. You can't have fun and have money. I'm guilty because I have money and there's people starving in Africa. I mean, it was, and so I wrote it out. I stayed with the project for an hour, and I'm like, well, that's why I'm broke. I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. I'm running a marathon with a 20-pound bowling ball around my ankle. It's not going to work. So then I had to write a little more of an empowering story. So it was, making and saving big money is easy. Money is the scorecard of value that I'm bringing to other people's lives. If I'm personally growing, so should my money. And so and then that's, I started affirming that stuff. And so when my mind would go down the rabbit hole of lack and all that stuff, I would just do the shift. And that's what my book's about, is the awareness and then the shifting to have a different thought, to take a different action, to get a different result. And my coach was right. It wasn't overnight, but we had a miraculous transformation, and it would have never have happened because I was already working 80, 90 hours a week. Like, I couldn't work any harder.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I was lazy sitting on my butt, but that 20-pound bowling ball got taken off, and, amazing things happened.
Yeah. You rewired the hardwiring, right? You said 95%, we are 95% hardwired by age 18. You figure if it takes 18 years to be hardwired, you got to rewire, yeah. I'd love to ask the question. This is something that I know has made a huge impact for myself, just in business and mindset, is this idea of not only maybe having a coach, like you said you had, or having a mentor, but also the role of people around you, right? They say that you're the sum of the 5 people closest to you. I always like to say this when it comes to people's health and wellness, right? Are you surrounded by people who like to live an active lifestyle? Are you surrounded by people who would rather go, cook a healthy meal at home versus go out to a fast food restaurant? You know what I mean? Like, those types of things matter. I assume the same thing matters when it comes to this money mindset, right? My husband and I started seeking out mentors in business probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It sort of just landed in our lap that these people were sort of introduced to us through mutual circles, and a lot of them were highly successful entrepreneurs. And it was amazing how just getting around them leveled us up, not just from a growth perspective, but also opened up opportunity for us as it pertained to finances. So I'd love to talk about this, like the role of people around you, and how that influences you from a financial perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's substantial, and you can see it in society. The wealthy people live in one area, middle class lives in one area, and people that struggle live in another area. It's vibrational. It's like attracts like. And And so that concept of, your income's the average of the 5 people you hang out with. And everybody's like heard these things. And this is a big concept that I talk about is, my coach would say, you need to do this. And I would say, well, I only said it once. And it was actually, he said, you need to save money. And I hadn't saved any money because I basically hired him because we set a savings goal and then we had to double our income. And so one of the first coaching sessions, he said, Chris, did you save any money this week? And I was like, well, I didn't have any money to save. So how can I save money if I don't have any money to save? And he said, you've been using that BS excuse for how long? Like, that's not acceptable. You need to save money. And I said, I know that. And we never met. We did this all over the phone. And we worked for 4.5 years. Jen, if he would have been live, he would have punched me. Because he said, if you say I know that one more time, this relationship's over. Because based on results, and I hated when he'd say that. But that would snap me out of my pride. He'd say, based on results, how well do you know things? And he said, based on results, dude, you don't know anything. Why are you saying you know it? You don't know a thing. You're $250,000 in debt. Your wife's got 1 foot out the door. Your kids don't know who their dad is. You don't know anything. And the problem, Chris, when you say you know that, you reject any opportunity to change. And I do this in the workshop. I mean, I use health. I ask the crowd, I'm like, how do you live a healthy life? I eat well, I get plenty of rest, I manage my stress, I don't smoke, I watch my drinking, all these things. And then, you see the crowd and most people aren't healthy. So they know how to be healthy, but why aren't they doing it? And so when they say, I know that, anyway, so the reason I'm talking about this, and so he said, I'll know you know it when you're living the results. And I never said, I know that one more time. I never said it again. And when I coach my team, when they say that, I have the same reaction. I'm like, you don't know it. Why do you say you know it? You're not living the results. So on your whole point of associations, almost everybody's heard this conversation. I need to hang around the right people. I know that. So it's one of those things that falls into our lives. I call it the important non-urgent quadrant of our lives. So money hangs out over there. Spirituality hangs out over there. Our health hangs out over there. And we deal with urgent, mainly non-important, and I call our cell phones the weapon of mass distraction. The weapon of mass distraction. So we deal with all this stuff that is important, non-urgent, or not important and urgent. It's not important and urgent. And then this stuff over here that hangs out in the important, non-urgent quadrant of our lives, our dreams, those things, at some point they become important, urgent, like our health. And then there's little we can do about it when that happens. And so this whole topic of associations, it's super important to have that, but it is very much an important, non-urgent thing. And so what happens is people hear, oh, I got to hang out with the right people. I got to change my associations. I'll get to that. They don't do anything about it. They're not intentional about it. And so if you hear this, you're like, I gotta up-level my associations. Okay, grab a journal. I'm a big journal guy. And write down, what are you going to do to change that? And my wife, because our money situation became very urgent, very important. You don't need to wait for it to happen, But in that moment, my wife said, all right, I'm going to leverage these relationships we have, and I'm going to go interview these people and figure out how they do it and what they do. And we up-level our associations. So your associations are everything.
Yeah.
And the world-class thinkers, they understand that to the core of their being. Middle-class thinkers, the masses who are addicted to being comfortable, they just go, yeah, got it. But I got to go play this video game. I need to go do this. I need to do that. Or, it's not like they're not working hard and doing things, but once I'm done being busy, then I'll get to that. And then they just never get to it. So I think you got to sit down. I got to change my associations. What's your game plan to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way you're making us think about this. And, this is everything in the last 5 minutes, especially. I made a bunch of notes for myself. I want to pull this out for some promo clips because I just think it's so good and so needed. One thing that I've been working with a life coach myself for the last 10 years or so, and she sometimes will do little mastermind groups for myself and my team. And one thing that she says often, or I guess that women in these groups say often, are things like, I need to, right? I need to do that. It's kind of the same thing as what you were saying, like, I know, right? Well, you might know, and you might like need to do something, but the one thing that my life coach will always pop in and say is, what'd you say? Like, she'll stop people in their thought process and they'll say, well, I need to do that, right? I need to surround myself with successful people, or I need to really focus on my nutrition, or I need to go to bed earlier, or whatever, and she'll say, okay, let's reframe that. Let's make that an I will statement. I will go to bed earlier starting tonight, right? I will surround myself with positive people. This is the first person I'm going to reach out to, right? Like creating the action plan and having that source of accountability, whether it's through a life coach or just a friend, right? Having that sense of accountability of being like, not only do I need to do this, but I'm going to do this, right? And that's the shift. Probably the most important thing. One thing that we talked about that I want to make sure we address as well, which often comes up, it often for me, is this idea of worthiness, right? And it's not just having to do with finances either. It's just this idea that I think a lot of people are sort of living in this, like you said before, this life of, I think you called it non-urgent, important things, right? Like we think it's important, but really it's just the day flies by. We look back and was there really anything super impactful about that day? Or did we just sort of survive the day? This idea of intentionality, right, is so huge. But I want to talk about this idea of worthiness. You sort of alluded earlier to the fact that you started doing like affirmations and, in this whole idea of like rewiring your brain, I have to assume that, forgiveness was likely the first step, forgiving that ex-wife, but then also coming to grips with the fact that like, you are worthy of this money, or you are worthy of good health, or you are worthy of enter XYZ. So I want to talk about that as well.
Yeah. I mean, we show up on this planet as babies, and we're perfect love, and we don't have problems and issues and concerns and judgments, and we feel that we deserve to be loved and we deserve to be taken care of. So Jenny, we don't show up with any problems. We don't have any worthiness problems when we show up. And then somewhere along that programming path, we're told, bad boy, bad girl, you're less than, you're this, whatever. And it's defenseless because you normally can't accept or reject it. So you accept that I'm not good enough, or you do something wrong. You don't forgive yourself. I mean, really, the root of all worthiness and deserving issues is you haven't fully forgiven yourself. Usually. Because if you're a bad person, bad boy, bad girl, and you haven't forgiven yourself, then why would a bad person deserve to be wealthy or successful or whatever? So it just goes on, and like money and like all this programming is, it can go our whole life. And here's the scary part: it can go our whole lives, and it can never get questioned or checked. And I had to start checking it at 37. I mean, that's 37 years, Jenny, of not questioning what's in my mind. And, I borrow this from Lisa Nichols, if you know who she is. I mean, she's unbelievable, but, she didn't call them limiting beliefs. She said, these are lies that I tell myself. And so what are the lies that I'm telling myself? And worthiness and deserving what was one of them. And I'm like, because it pops up. It's like, oh, you don't deserve this. You don't do that. Or for me, it was like, okay, you must go scale Mount Everest and do all this to earn your deservingness. That was my whole thing. So I can't deserve success unless I, go through tremendous pain and go through the hero's journey and all that. And so I'm like, dude, I got a deserving thing going on here. I need to check into this. And so I started studying it, and I got, the root is I haven't forgiven myself, and there was a lot I needed to forgive myself for. My divorce, the situation, the stress, some of the stupid stuff I did when I was growing up, and so I was doing that. But then I started studying it, and I'm like, well, nature doesn't have a deserving problem. Trees aren't like, do I deserve to grow? This grass is like, do I deserve to grow? Birds don't go, do I deserve to eat? Or no, nature has zero deserving issues. So what was a home run for me, Jenny, was I realized this whole worthiness deserving thing, it's a man-made, made-up mind virus. It's just garbage. And so when I was like, oh my God, it's just a virus that somebody made up, and we bought it. So my whole thing was recognizing that it was a lie. It had been programmed in me, and I didn't need to hire a therapist to pull the scab off. I didn't need to go back to my childhood or any of that. When it would come up, I would just have to redirect. So when it would come up, it'd be like, oh, you don't deserve it. My past would be like, oh my God, there's my deserving thing again. And instead of calling it a limiting belief, I'm like, well, that's just a lie I've repetitively told myself. So when the deserving thing comes up, instead of paying attention to it, I'm just going to interrupt, scripture, affirmation, something go to, and I'm going to say that out loud for a minute, and I'm going to shift it. And then the beauty is what you don't pay attention to eventually atrophies, it eventually falls away. And so I don't know when it fell away, but eventually it fell away because I ceased to give it power anymore. Because the big thing is, and the reason I wanted to change, Jenny, was I connected the prices that other people in my life were paying for me wanting to stay the same. And it was too big of a price because my back was against the wall. I was going to lose big time. And it was too heavy of a price. But if I wouldn't have connected the prices that others were paying in my life for me wanting to stay the same, I probably wouldn't have changed. But when I connected that, I'm like, dude, you're about ready to lose real big. You need to change. Then, but deservingness was something I had to address, but I'm glad I did. And it's total BS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's connected, right? Like this idea of like scarcity mindset and money beliefs and whether or not you feel worthy, right? It's all interconnected. It's so interesting too, because I think I'm learning so much more, especially in these last couple of years, about the role of different traumas in our life, right? And how different traumas impact who we become and the way we think. It doesn't always have to be big T trauma. It doesn't always have to be gun violence or things like that. It can be just relationship things. I have some things that I'm working through with, extremely close loved ones who have said things to me that have been really impactful about the way that I think about myself, right? And so a lot of times I think we can beat ourselves up because we think that it's completely on us as far as, it is on us as far as how we shape it and how we think of it, right? But the things that have happened to us or have been said to us over time really build into who we are and what we believe. I think back to, I was good at school. I didn't love school, right? So I could master what the teachers wanted me to do. I could follow the rules. I could fit in the box. And I tried for like probably the majority of my 20s to navigate my life in a way that fit into the box, right? Like what are the subject areas that I'm good at? How can I sort of just follow suit, right? And it wasn't until I had this really big epiphany that I talked about on the podcast before, this personal growth moment where I realized that it wasn't up to my school or my employer to really make me better, and to help me grow. It was really up to me, right? It was up to me to figure out. You mentioned this earlier, and I wanted to come back to it. This idea of goal setting versus achieving, and this idea of being what I like to call a serial podcaster. You called it a personal development zombie. That was me in my 20s, because I believed that it was by luck. I believed that success was by luck. I believed that success was something that happened if you had the right people in your life, but it just fell into you. It didn't land on you to be the intentional person to seek it out, right? And so I say that because now that I'm going on 40, right, I can look back and say, gosh, so much of that came from the way that I grew up. It came up from the things that I was taught in school. It came up with, you're good at this, you're bad at this, you need to work on that, right? And all those things shape how we think. I want to say this, what question am I not asking that needs to be asked? So if my listeners are listening to this, I know they're taking tons of mental notes. You guys who are listening, I hope you come back and listen to this again. I know I've taken so much from this, because I love the way he's making us think. This whole idea that, we can change our thoughts. And that's really, I like to talk about root cause. This podcast is dedicated a lot to root cause medicine, trying to figure out for women what's going on at the root as to why they're feeling low energy and all that kind of stuff, right? And so really the root here is your thoughts, right? It's really changing your thoughts, which then change your habits, like we said, which then changes your behaviors in your life. There's a book out there that I will recommend. I'll throw it in here too, and I'll mention it in the show notes as well. Atomic Habits. And what's the other one I'm thinking of? Charles Duhigg has a book on habits as well. And they talk about habit stacking, right? And I think this is something that, when we're listening to you talk about, okay, this thing would happen, and then I would change the way I thought about it. I think it's very similar to this idea of changing habits as well, right? Like, so what's a habit that you currently have, and how can you identify that with something different? For example, let's say that you want to take on meditation, right? That's been something that's been a goal for me in the past. This year, I'm really making it a conscious, intentional effort. So every morning, I brew my coffee. It takes about 3 minutes to brew the coffee, right? So while I'm brewing the coffee, that's something that I do every day. I open up a 3 to 5 minute meditation on my phone. And that's something that I listen to while I'm brewing the coffee, right? So something simple like that. Like, how can you take something in your life that you're already doing and then add a good habit onto it? I think the same thing goes for thoughts, right? Like, what is a thought? Maybe even just putting pen to paper and saying, what are the self-limiting beliefs? Like, what am I telling myself about money? What am I telling myself about my health? What's holding me back? And by writing it down and putting it on paper, I have to assume that then you're able to say, oh gosh, that's something that I put down in that notebook, right? Like, so next time it pops up in your head, you can change that thought pattern. So I want to talk about thought patterns. And I also want to just ask you the question, what's left to be said? What question am I not asking that people need to hear?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and it's a quote. It's one of my favorite quotes is, we're a miracle and a mess at the same time. And, we come here we did not come here to get perfect, but we did come here to grow and change. And my favorite formula is there's me plus a thought equals a result. Me plus a thought equals a result. So if I don't like the result, there's me, and there's my thinking. And so for me, that's always been empowering, Jenny, because I don't have to control. I tried to control the outside and stay the same, and that's rearranging the furniture on the deck of the Titanic. It doesn't work, and it's exhausting. But what was empowering for me is, okay, if I could just change my thinking and give myself grace. People don't give themselves grace. And hey, it's going to take a little bit of time, and it's not about being perfect. Perfection is a form of self-sabotage. But if I can just, do a little work every single day and buy into the fact that that's going to compound over time, and all I can do is really control this day. I can't get into the future. Everything that's going on in my life right now is based on prior thinking. So I can't necessarily change that. But if I want to change my future, I can change now. Plant a tree 20 years ago, next best time to plant a tree is today. And so I just got intentional about planting seeds and planting seeds in, my life. And then also just quit making it so much about me. What can I do to bring value and service to other people? And if you want to create, money flow in your life, then to start the flow, something's got to give, and you got to give. You got to get out there. And so, as you're working on your thoughts, and I remember one time I was talking to my coach, and I haven't thought about this in a while, and I was so me, woe is me. He would say, "Hey, fear and depression are the highest forms of selfishness because it's all about you." And he got so fed up with the me, and the whining and all that. He said, "Just why don't you go volunteer in a soup kitchen?" And he hung up on me because he was so sick of that. He was so sick of me, and my problems and my issues and all this and all that. And so part of, my morning routine is going through 3 questions, and it's how I end my meditation and my morning think time is, how can I grow? So what I'm working on right now is, how can I grow? I want to have better time awareness. So just better time awareness of where am I wasting time, blowing time, all that. That's kind of my project right now. How can I grow? What can I give? And so that's been programmed in me for, however many years I've been doing that. So be thinking about that, like just intentional in my giving. And then looking at my schedule, where can I add value? How can I add value today? Where can I add value? How can I grow? What can I give? And then what can I celebrate? And having an appreciation and gratitude, because my coach was like, you got some stuff, but you got a lot of good stuff going on in your life. And the analogy he gave me was, he's like, Chris, you've been to Hawaii, you've been to Maui. Can you imagine flying to Maui, finding a pothole, and spending a week staring at the pothole in Maui? How's that going to be? How's that trip going to be? If somebody asks you, how was Maui? What are you going to say? Heinous, ugly, horrible time. Well, why? Because that's where my focus was. And the law of growth is the preeminent law in personal development. What I'm focused on expands. And so he was like, yeah, you got some stuff you got to work on. But, 85 to 90% of your life's working. So quit staring at the pothole, quit staring at the problems, quit staring at the issues. Take the focus off of you, man. What are you going to do to contribute today? Are you going to add value to other people's lives? And I think the last thing, if I had to go back in time, is just relax. Relax. And that was a big shift for me. Last story, I promise. And I was in a personal development seminar. Bob Proctor was like in his early 80s, and he got up there, and it was a week-long personal development seminar. And my vision was stretched. I was thinking bigger than I'd ever thought in my life. It was amazing. And I was getting stressed out because I'm like, how am I going to make this happen? My hero's journey, hard work program, he started kicking in. And then, Bob Proctor got up and he said, I'm going to tee it up for the next 10 years of my life, but I'm going to do it in a relaxed, calm manner. And he called it calm urgency. Changed my life. I could feel the stress just leave my body. And the world class, by and large, they're relaxed. They're urgent, they're intentional, but they're very relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone that struggles, they're stressed. Why are they stressed? Because they're thinking about what they need to do in the future. They're beating themselves up about the past. And as you know, your point of power is right here and now. And so you're missing all of that. So calm down, relax would be the last thing I would say. And you just got to trust that things are going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, I think when we think about leading a rich life, right, it doesn't just mean financially. It means just your relationships and who you are as a person. And that's such good advice. You know, I know as a type A personality, it can be easy to worry. It can be easy to always want to have a plan or a strategy. And like we said at the beginning, right, when really it's sometimes more of a matter of just sort of controlling your emotions and settling down and really creating that awareness in yourself. These are all really great tips. I just recently listened to a podcast interview with Tim Tebow, who I really have known very little about, but the interview was really fascinating. He talked about the same thing you were just saying, which is a lot of times we're waiting for success. You know, like, well, when I achieve this, then I'll give back, or when I reach a certain point, then I'll be able to volunteer more or dedicate more of my time or think about other people, right? It's self until we think that like we have to reach a certain point in order to give, as you said. And so I just want to say that, you know, one of the things that I learned from him too is very similar to what you're saying, which is this idea of switch that thinking around to like, how can I give now? Because that will enhance your life and make it more rich. Right. So I want to make sure we point people to your book and everything that you were doing. So I'll give you a few minutes here to just tell us about the book a little bit, tell us how people can find it, when it launches, all the things, and I'll make sure to link it up in the show notes for people as well.
Yeah, I've been the books will be live on February 28th, and it's in pre-order right now. And we hit Amazon bestseller in 2 categories in pre-order, and we hit number 2 in Canada, and it's awesome. But yeah, it's a lot of this conversation, Jenny. It took me 14 months to write it. I got mentored by my mentor Steve Siebold, who's sold 4 million books, and he said we need to slow down and make sure this thing's impactful. And the gist of the book is it's simple, it flows. We'll have a topic like forgiveness. I do 200 to 300 words of teaching, and then I have a quote, and then a resource. So it's a book, a podcast, a seminar somebody can use, and then it's an action step. And so like in my forgiveness story, I talk about that action step of writing that name down and looking at the appreciation, and then my story of my ex-wife and how that all folded together. Behind each chapter is a story, and it's and so the feedback I'm getting from it is super real, very vulnerable. When I was writing it with Steve, he's like going, "Oh my God, dude, you are not holding back. Like you're telling everybody your dirty laundry." And I said, dude, that's the only way I know how to teach, is teaching people the mistakes I've made so they can avoid it. So it's so the feedback's been amazing, and I'm very blessed and humbled, and it's already making an impact. So yeah, so you can go to chrisfelton.me and hit the menu and find the book, and then I have the book is written in such a way, Jenny, that somebody that they lead a team of people, they can scan the table of contents and say, hey, Chris, I want you to come in and deliver a keynote on these 5 topics. I probably have 6 to 7 workshops in there, so I can do custom tailored workshops for people. And so that's so the book, the speaking, the workshops is my main mode of operation, and that's what I want to do is just make a big impact and impact tens of millions of people's lives. So that's what I'm all about.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure to link up chrisfelton.me in the show notes, and you guys can pre-order the book, or if it's after the book launches, you can order the book for yourself. I can't wait to read it myself. I love everything that you're doing, and I think you have a sense of speaking that really resonates for me. I mean, when you're telling your stories, like you said, your vulnerability, I think there's such impact there, because when we can really show people who we really are and sort of the mess, right, that we've gone through ourselves, it helps people understand better and to really kind of have this thought of, okay, it's not just me, right? Like I resonate with this because this sounds a lot like my life or ways of my life can improve. So I love everything that you had to say today. I think we covered a lot of really great ground. I love having these conversations as much as I love talking about things like estrogen dominance and PCOS and hormone related stuff. I know at the end of the day that if a woman listening to this is living in a state of stress, if they're living in a scarcity mindset, if there's worry around money, right? If there's relationship hardship because of money, all these things impact them and it impacts their hormones, right? And so it's all interconnected. We are one being, mind, body, and spirit. And I love having guests like you on to really nail these things home. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to meet with us. I know I can't wait to read the book. I can't wait for my listeners to offer feedback on this podcast because I know it was a great episode. So thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Yeah, you're awesome,
I so
Jenny.
appreciate it. And congratulations too on bestseller. That's an amazing thing. Cool. And you're just getting started. It's not even launched yet. So awesome. Okay, my friends, thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. We'll talk again soon.